I will start by saying this is a slide we're using for one of our other initiatives, the Employer Resource Network. And when we took all of last year to research that model, and then we launched that model in February of this year. But just to give you an idea, a lot of these statistics are from Michigan, where we learned about that model. But Work First are participants that go for, it would be similar to people going down to DSS and going through their one-stop program, which is their welfare to work type program. So you see that the percentages are not good in terms of people trying to get back into the workforce. Now this is a very real issue for us here at the Mission, because many of our men and women that are either coming here just to stay at the shelter, or even when they go through our year-long program, are struggling with chronic homelessness, addiction issues, legal issues, things like that. And getting and maintaining a job is a huge thing. And so as we went down this road, this was more of a general, how do we support employees on the job? Then as we got to a point of feeling comfortable with where we were going with that, and we've already been 7 months into that project, and the return on investment is huge, the retention rates are phenomenal, so that model's working. But one of the things we said from the beginning is we do need to address some of the more specific challenges. And whether it's employers you speak to, or employees that you speak to, or people that are just trying to get a job, again and again, the two greatest barriers, I would say the three greatest barriers, but number one is transportation across the board for people. Okay? Secondly is childcare, reliable childcare. And then third is anything related to healthcare issues, mental health issues, things like that. And so we said, you know what, let's talk about and think about what are some answers to transportation, to the barrier of transportation in our community. And so as we looked at these numbers, many of the people that get jobs and then lose jobs come back saying, I didn't have reliable transportation or bus. And so a couple of stories come to mind right away. We have one gentleman who's a graduate of our program, lives right here on Lafayette Street, who has worked for a few years now over at Albany Marriott. He works in their facilities and events team, I believe, and he takes the 355 or 905 bus, which leaves downtown Schenectady and goes straight up, and then you have to get off at Colony Center there, and then he has to either walk or ride his bike another 1.5 miles or so over to the Marriott, which is nice on a gorgeous day like this, right? But in the dead of winter, riding your bike is not the funnest thing in the world. So just the fact that he's been able to retain that job for as long as he has is a testament to his work ethic, his desire for change, that kind of thing. But the sustainability of that long term is challenging for anybody, especially if you add in things like, well, I have a second job, or I have children, or something like that. So another story that is very fresh, just came to us recently, was one of the guys that was staying in our shelter, and Jesse did a great job of showing this. Everybody got one of these in the email, I think, but I'll let Jesse pass it around so we can reference it. Thank you. This gentleman has a food service job. I think he's working in the kitchen somewhere. His job is at a restaurant over at 20 Mall in Guilderland. So when he gets off at night, at roughly 10 or 11 o'clock at night, because of the lack of the bus system traveling where he needs to go to get back here, he has to walk 45 minutes from there, get on a bus at Crossgates Mall. That bus then takes him to a bus stop in Albany. He gets on a different bus that takes him to Colony Center, where then he can get on his third bus and make his way back to Schenectady, equaling about a 3-hour trip. Now, I've been tracking him on our case notes every day, and this guy, at least since he's come here, has gone to work earlier in the day and returns from work around 1 or 1:30 in the morning after getting off his shift around 10 or 10:30. Okay? So, that we all recognize that's not sustainable. It's also costly. Every time you get on the bus, that's $1.50. So he's paying a lot of money also on top of walking and everything else. So that just gives a snapshot. That may be an extreme example, but it certainly shows the real life issues that people are facing to maintain employment. There's a lot. Have you experienced this in the last 6 months? You've had later absent employees due to transportation issues, quality candidates that are unable to take jobs because of a lack of transportation, and then they're unreliable, especially in inclement weather. Okay? If you've ever ridden the bus before, even if it's a beautiful summer day and a thunderstorm hits downtown, but your job's in Albany and it didn't rain over there, I guarantee you your pathway to getting to work on time and presentable is going to be greatly affected by that thunderstorm. And so we want to help the employers as well as obviously help the employees and potential employees, people that are getting jobs. So we looked at this issue, this idea of lack of reliable transportation. How is there a way to do better than what's being done right now? There's a few small programs in our community that offer things like Catholic Charities has a program called Wheels to Work. You go to a financial class, you've got to qualify, there's some stipulations, and then you are able to get a small loan to get a used car. Okay? That's great and may be helpful for I think they said in Albany, Schenectady, Troy, they've served like 75 people in a year. So that's helpful, but it doesn't solve the bigger issues. Obviously, transportation, CDTA, public transportation is great, but they have limits also. And then, of course, there's calling a cab and taking a cab. Many people take cabs, especially in seasonal work like the track up in Saratoga. I talked to a gentleman last year who would either take a cab or pay a friend $40 each way to get to work over the summer. And so we think we have a way to help overcome it by bringing resources together. So we sat here, and December was around the time frame that TransFinder moved into their new building across the street. TransFinder is a leading global routing software company. They help, I think, something like 3 million kids get to school every day by partnering with bus companies and school districts with their innovative routing software. So they moved in. Not only do they have a great building and we have a great partnership anyway, we said, well, maybe we can utilize their skills and their technical ability. Then we said, similar to our employer resource network, are there a group of businesses that would come together and say, this is a shared issue that we have. Can we share the cost of solving the problem together? Okay. Then on the right side is the Coalition of Faith-Based Organizations. That's what we are. Really saying, and this comes from my days working at a church, knowing that we had 3 15-passenger vans that sat in our parking lot roughly 95% of the week unused. Could they be utilized in a way? And not to mention, can we get volunteers engaged in a way that's maybe a different way to help people and support people? Then obviously the mission has served as a great coordinating agency for a lot of these types of initiatives. And then we brought Schenectady County Community College to the table because we thought they're doing a lot of work. They're a great partner with us in terms of workforce development and training of people, especially people coming out of poverty and being under-resourced. So maybe we can utilize their skills and background in some way. So we had all these pieces together, and then we got everybody together at the table, and everybody agreed this is a great idea. This is awesome. What SCC has done through their workforce development arm of their school, they brought together, they had a grant about 4 years ago, one of the biggest grants in New York State for a community college. They won for the Health Professionals Opportunities Grant. So they train home health aides, certified nursing assistants, that kind of thing. But it's a federal grant. Well, they've been doing awesome in terms of their numbers, getting people trained into jobs, that kind of thing. So they had some money left over. So in this year's grant, they wrote in this concept and said, can we have some money to try it out, to run a pilot project to see if this idea can actually work? And so they presented that, I think submitted that in March, and the director went out to Kansas City to meet with the national organization that oversees this grant, and there's about 35 communities around the country that do this particular work. And she gets there, and the head federal guy that oversees the grant couldn't stop talking about this idea. She hadn't even heard anything after submitting it. So lo and behold, we got the money. $70,000 was freed up as part of that grant to run a feasibility study and a pilot project, pilot phase. So then we got back together in early April and said, oh no, we actually have to do this. So it looks great on the screen, but then when you actually have to work it out, that makes it a little more challenging. But that's where we are right now, is we're putting this thing together, and we are in the process of making it happen. So right now we're in the nearing the end of the feasibility study, and that's where TransFinder is doing most of the work. They were given a good chunk of that money to adapt their software and their online solutions to fit the needs of what we're trying to do. The stipulations for this pilot phase were simply that we needed to work with some home health aid companies. They're the ones that are going out, sending employees out to do home health care, home health aides, certified nursing assistants, that kind of thing. Now, if you are an HHA, which is a home health aide, you are coming in between the $8 and $10 range per hour. Okay? So that right away tells you, or is an indicator, that you probably don't have a lot of resources, especially if you've come through a program like Schenectady County Community College. There's income guidelines, so you're probably under-resourced, in poverty, or have been in poverty, so you probably don't have a vehicle. Most of these companies are saying, even if you're a great employee, I can only hire you if you have a car, because we don't have any kind of service. The concept is this: it's taking those circles on the previous slide and then bringing them together into more of a unified business plan. But the idea is that we show that this model works, and then in the future, over the next 6 to 8 months, then we invite businesses in to buy into the program. Because at the end of the day, I'll show you on this next slide, by buying into it, your workforce, you have a shared need. You have a shared problem, which is reliable transportation for your employees. They're generally under-resourced. This low-cost shared transportation resource utilizes that routing software, the volunteers and vehicles, and a coalition of workforce experts like Schenectady County Community College, ourselves here at City Mission. And the goal then is to show to businesses that if you buy into this is not just a free service being handed to, but if you buy into this, you're going to improve your productivity and morale. Because one of the beauties of what we're going to talk about is, imagine sitting in a vehicle with an employee where he's just met with Aunt Susie, who's ornery because she's got some kind of physical ailment. You go from that appointment to another one, and in the vehicle, as you're driving this person around, you get to coach them a little bit, encourage them. You can just envision all of what could happen, the relationships that happen. And what we've seen in some other models is that employees are encouraged. Their morale is boosted, and guess who they love to work for? Those employees. Increase retention and reduce turnover. Both cost savings to a business. Okay? On average, the cost for an entry-level employee is about 30 to 50% of that annual salary. So if someone's making 20 grand a year, okay, at an entry-level position, if they lose their job, that business is going to have to pay for training and promotions and all this HR time. So they're going to save that by keeping the employee. Better patient customer service. We're going to help these businesses be able to serve their customers better and reach a whole new, that last point, expand services, increase profit, grow business, which in the end helps many of our men and women that we work with get jobs and sustain employment. Okay? So this is a pilot project. We think this is an awesome idea. We think there's huge potential here, but we also recognize that we don't have all the answers. Part of a feasibility study, as I've learned recently through this thing, is you problem solve along the way. You figure out what works and what doesn't work, and you adjust on the fly. And especially the pilot project, when we run it from September 1 to September 29th, we're really asking volunteers that are taking this to the level of, I'm being paid to be here. to be a part of this, because if we have one wheel that, you know, kind of falls off on this thing, it could affect the entire picture, even if the concept is workable. Does that make sense? So we're really targeting some key volunteers that are innovative, that like to kind of live on the edge and try something new. If you're talking to people and they say, well, I just want to serve, I just want to plug into something that's been around a while, this is not, at this point, this is not the place to send them. Okay? This is a brand new, as far as we can tell, there's nothing like this around the country. So we are breaking ground that, as far as we can tell, has never been broken before. But we think the potential benefits far outweigh those risks and the challenges and the tough work ahead of us to make this thing viable. So